From 1973 until 1976 lasted the longest and most expensive case in Oneida County, New York's history. And stick around until the end because this story has a twist that nobody saw coming. This story has very graphic content, so viewer discretion is advised. If you're a fan of true crime and horror told in a different way than most, then you've come to the right place. So hit that like button like it's a mailbox and you're driving down that road in a convertible. The town of Steuben is in upstate New York, about 30 minutes from Utica. It's a small rural town where there are more cows than people. This area was considered a safe place until 1973 when everything changed. Mary Rose Turner was a 56-year-old woman and a mother of 5. She was well liked in her community and nobody had anything bad to say about her. One thing that she suffered from, though, was insomnia. Insomnia is a sleep disorder where you struggle to fall asleep or even stay asleep. And on April 26, 1973, Mary was suffering from insomnia really bad that night, and she decided, like other nights, I think I'm going to go for a stroll in the middle of the night. It'll tire me out, and I should be able to fall asleep. Mary would set out on a walk, expecting this to be a peaceful walk in the night, and little did she know it would be the last time she would go out on a walk. Mary walked this path down her road where she would go from her apartment and end up walking by a Shell gas station that was open 24 hours. She left on this walk and she never returned home. The next day, an elderly farmer named James Weekly was outside in the early hours of the morning, and as he looked out, he saw a green car drive by that looked like it was dragging something white behind it. He thought this was kind of odd, but he chalked it up to maybe it was a couple who had just gotten married and they had some of those cans dragging behind them. Later that day, he went out shopping to go get some groceries, and on his way back, he saw this trail of some stuff on the ground that just seemed kind of out of the ordinary, and he would end up following this trail until he got to what appeared to be some remnants of clothing and what he thought was internal organs. Being a farmer, he would have a good idea of what the insides of an animal look like, but that's when it clicked in his head. He remembered seeing that green car this morning, dragging something white behind it, and he knew in his head, maybe that was a body. So James immediately called the cops and had them come out there to do an investigation on this scene. And when they get out there, they would send those internal organs to forensics to be investigated. So this was a small town where nothing really happened. So the cops were joking with James. They told him, "You've been reading way too many of those detective books, haven't you, James?" But shortly after this, the police would get a call from the forensic unit and learned those internal organs, they were human. So all that joking at that point stopped. And the police started searching more because now they knew this was something really bad. The police called in search dogs to help them with the investigation, and the dogs would end up finding a body in a shallow grave. This is the viewer discretion. The body was mutilated beyond belief. The hands were cut off, the feet were cut off, and the face was described as being erased from being dragged behind that car. Only an ear and some hair were left above the neck. This was one of the most horrific murders anybody in the area had ever seen. They would discover this is the body of Mary Rose Turner. The police started their search, and several eyewitnesses said they saw Bernard Hatch driving his green car that morning. Bernard was an ex-Marine with a prior record, and he had proximity to Mary's home. His prior record had charges of sexual assault and rape, so he became the police's lead suspect. They would start building a case, and it took them months to secure a warrant to search his property. But once they did, on his property, they would find grisly tools and a bunch of newspaper clippings about the murder of Mary. So on October 17, 1973, Bernard Hatch was arrested for the murder of Mary Rose Turner. It wasn't until April of 1976 that this case would come to an end, costing Onieda County over $1 million. And the jury would find Bernard guilty of second-degree murder and get a sentence of 25 years to life. During the trial, Bernard's friends said that he was bragging about killing Mary and not getting caught. He even said to them, "I tied a girl to the back of my car so I could get the truth out of her." The most haunting thing he said was after he was convicted. He said, "You should have seen what I did to the bodies before I buried them." This part stuck with a lot of people because prior to Mary being found, there were 3 other girls in the area who had went missing and nobody knew what happened. But this was the 70s, so a lot of people assumed they just ran away. But Many people believe Mary wasn't his first victim, but actually just his last, and that he was a serial killer. However, there was no evidence of these missing girls, so Bernard was never tried for any besides Mary. Bernard did try to appeal time and time again after serving the 25 years in prison. However, he was never awarded another trial to prove his innocence. And on November 8th, 2021, he died in prison at the age of 81. The part of the story that nobody ever talks about is that Bernard was married, and in 1974, his wife would take her own life. There was a lot of speculation as to why this happened, but many years later, the shocking truth came out. Bernard's granddaughter, Vanessa, had a box that was left to her from her grandmother, and she opened this box. Inside were pictures of her grandparents and some other things, but the most important thing in there were letters that her grandmother had left behind. In these letters, she stated that Bernard had a serious problem and couldn't help himself killing these girls. She stated how she would have to go with him to help him pick out these spots where he would dig shallow graves and bury them. It's believed that due to the guilt of everything Bernard's wife did and lived through, that she just couldn't go on anymore, and she ended up taking her life. A lot of people know that he was abusive and think that she helped him out of fear because she saw what he did to those girls, and she was afraid, what might he do to me? So she better just follow along. Vanessa tries to live a normal life to this day, but is still often affected by this tragedy because people treat her badly for the things that her grandfather did. And this whole story is a tragedy that struck a small town and changed it forever. The lives of the victims, the lives of the victims' families, and the lives of the people in Bernard's life were never the same ever again, and still haunt everyone to this day. If you got something from this story, subscribe and hit that like button with a baseball bat.